Hi, friends. This is Dorie Clark, and I am here live for the Newsweek interview show Better. And today we have Todd Cherches joining us. Todd is the author of a new book. It's called Visual Leadership. And we are going to be talking about that and learning all about how in this crazy world, this crazy COVID world, visual has become even more powerful and even more important than it already has been. So Todd, welcome. So glad to have you.
Sure, thanks for having me. This was great. So even we're both New Yorkers. We've never met in person. So, but between Zoom and social media, we're in each other's lives, which was great.
We are, absolutely. And I'm also especially happy to have all of you guys who are tuning in live here on the last day of 2020. And so if you are here and tuning in, we'd love to see who you are so that we can join you and give you a shout out. So please type into the comment box. Please type in your chat to let us know where you're from so that we can say hi to you. And so, Todd, I wanted to actually just start out. So you wrote this book. It's called Visual Leadership. It's actually, one, I have spelled it out for the novices, two words. Your book has it as one word, visual leadership, which is fantastic. What the heck does that mean? What do you mean by visual leadership? And why is that something that is so important right now?
Sure. So the idea behind visual leadership, and the reason I spell it as one word with a single shared L, is because basically who we are and how we lead is inseparable from the lens through which we see the world. So I kind of coined this word, and I actually applied for a patent service mark, and it was rejected twice, but the third time it was approved. So
that's right. So don't steal it, people. It's Todd's.
Yeah, but the point is, it's persistence. It's persistence. Like, don't give up just because you get 1 or 2 rejections. The third time was the charm. So that's the idea behind visual leadership. Is when we're talking about leadership, so often we talk about visionary leaders and having a leadership vision, but it's all about seeing, right? So my whole metaphor and my whole mindset is around looking, seeing, noticing. How do we get people to quote unquote see what we're saying, right? How do you get an idea out of your head into someone else's so they say, oh yeah, I get it. I see what you're saying. Because as a leader, there's 2 components of formulating your vision. One is coming up with the vision, and the other is articulating it in a clear, compelling, and inspiring way to motivate and inspire others so that that vision becomes a reality. So often people come up with the vision, but they can't get it out there into the world. And visual leadership is one way to do that more effectively through the power of visual imagery, mental models, frameworks, and storytelling, which we could talk more about.
Love it, Todd. Thank you so much. And I just want to say hi to some of the great people who are tuning in. It is the last day of the year, and some people might take that as an excuse to slack off, but not you, super smart, better viewers, because you are continuing even on the December 31st to be taking your lunch hour, or if you're in the West Coast, your breakfast hour, to be learning more and expanding yourself. So props to you, especially Janice from Walnut Creek, California. Hey, we've got Kelly from Bend, Oregon, Daniel from Washington. Jeff is just giving us nice compliments. Thank you, Jeff. Kendra from Silver Spring, Jenny in New York, Rich in New York, Omar from Germany. Oh my gosh. We've got our pal Alan from Western Mass. Hey there. This is great. We've got Mary from Florida. Oh my goodness. Really glad to have you guys. We have St. Croix, Minnesota, Cheryl. So thank you very much. So please feel free, everybody who's tuning in, to type your questions into the chat box for Todd. We want to hear from you about what's on your mind. But Todd, one thing that I wanted to start out with is, okay, let's assume we accept your premise, I certainly do, that it is important to be a visual leader, to summon that power. If somebody wanted to get started, but they feel like, you know what, this just isn't my strong suit, I'm not really good at it, I don't know what to do, what are the first things that people can actually start to do, like tangible actions, in order to become a better visual leader?
So first, it starts with just awareness. Be more aware of visuals around you. Look at logos. Look at just there's leadership lessons hiding in plain sight if we just know to look for them, right? So some people say, oh, I'm not a visual person, I'm an auditory person. Some people might say, oh, I am a very visual person. So what some people say is, oh, I can't draw, so this doesn't apply to me. So I talk about ICD, I can't draw syndrome. So even if you can't draw, if you could play Pictionary or charades, you could communicate visually, right, through body language and through sketching. In fact, I wrote my first article for Inc. magazine last month called, Can You Draw What Your Company Does? So that's one of the things to think about. How would you illustrate what you do so that people can look at it? How do you download ideas from your head and onto paper or some other medium so that people can look at it and say, oh, now I get it. Now I see what you're talking about. So I think that's the thing. There's 4 learning modalities: visual, auditory, reading and writing, and kinesthetic. They're not learning styles, because that's been kind of proven to not be true, but they're different ways of using communicating. So you could communicate with words, spoken, visual imagery, you can read and write, or you can use movement and touch and things like that. So it's really about using all your senses, but our brains are just wired visually. We're just drawn towards the visual. In fact, here's a real life example. Here's what else but using a visual example, right? So here's the book list from my NYU class, and here's the same book list, right? Which one is your eye drawn towards? Which one's going to get you to want to pick up that book and read it, right? So that's just one example of how text can contain a lot of information, but visuals is what really hooks us like a magnet.
I think that's such an important point, Todd. I mean, I do a lot of consulting around communication. I teach a course at Duke around communicating effectively as a leader. And one of the things we do on the first day is people give these mock presentations to the class. And one of the things that we talk about a lot is people's PowerPoints. I think that sometimes we learn by example. We learn from the people around us who often themselves are not necessarily that great at doing presentations. And so you will see things where it's literally like an Excel spreadsheet that someone has put on a PowerPoint screen, and they present it in a room of 200 people, and it's like you're looking at 900 cells of data. Yeah. I think that's a problem. I'm assuming, I don't mean to speak for you, that you do as well. Especially when it comes to something like PowerPoint or giving a presentation, how do you think about this? What can we be doing different or better?
Yes, I mean, whether it's an Excel spreadsheet or a Word document, people just put their notes up on the screen and think that's a slide. And then what happens? They start to read through it word by word, bullet by bullet, and that's the whole death by bullet point thing, right? And then I say to people, would you have wanted to sit through your own presentation? And they say no. I'm like, well, why are you torturing my brother and I always talk about that, people using PowerPoint as a torture device as opposed to a communication tool. So it's not the PowerPoint's fault, it's the user's fault, right? So many people just don't know a better way. So look at the best PowerPoint presenters, or Seth Godin, or what Steve Jobs used to do. The power of imagery, right? Very little text. Tell your story. You don't want to compete with your slides. And there's so many great books. Nancy Duarte's books like Slideology and Resonate, Gar Reynolds' books like Presentation Zen. That's kind of what got me thinking more visually back in probably 15 years ago, and got me to start realizing and noticing that, hey, there's a better way than just throwing your notes up on the screen and calling that a slide, right?
Yeah, I think that's really spot on. And if you are enjoying this conversation, folks, first of all, hit the like button. And second of all, ask a question to Todd, or even just share what you have enjoyed most so far. What are you learning that is resonating for you? The more that you identify points that stick out for you, the better you retain them, and also other people can learn from them as well. If you want to learn more about Todd and his work, you can go to toddcherches.com. If you want to learn more about my work and make sure you never miss one of these conversations, you can sign up for my email list and get a cool self-assessment at DorieClark.com. So, Todd, we had a great question come in from one of our viewers here. We have a lot of great folks who have joined us. And this person wants to know, how can we get teachers to be more visual leaders in the classroom when traditional pedagogy and class delivery is what a lot of people think is visual, but maybe really isn't? How do you apply this to education specifically?
Yeah, well, I'm an adjunct professor of leadership at NYU, where I teach in the Human Capital Management graduate program. I've been doing that for 10 years. And I also teach leadership at Columbia in a number of different programs, including guest lecturing in their MFA theater program, teaching leadership for Broadway stage managers. So that's fun. I know you're a big Broadway person, so I get to incorporate some show tunes and some Shakespeare and things like that into that class that I wouldn't do in my NYU class. But I was going to say, my other role at NYU is I do faculty observation, assessment, and coaching. So I actually sit in on other faculty members' classes to help them communicate more visually and to be more effective. So yes, most people teach the way they were taught, and most people are taught through lecture and textbook, right? That's just old school style. But in today's age of limited attention spans, we've just got to do it in a different way. So it's better slides. It's using interactivity, experiential learning. It's using props. Like just on my desk right here, I have my Curious George to remind me to always be curious. ABC, always be curious. My Gumby, try to be flexible. That's not one of my specialties, so I'll just throw that behind me. So, but my wife gave me this shell to remind me to slow down and talk a little slower. Again, does not work. So one of the things I always say is like, even though I talk loud and fast because I'm a New Yorker, I'm by nature an introvert. So, and I know you are as well. I love some of your HBR articles on introversion. So it's all about being animated, if you have a passion and a purpose, two P's, right? If you're passionate about what you're talking about and you have a purpose behind it, you will come across with enthusiasm. So one time, one of the professors that I was coaching, he said, well, the first part of this, he actually said to his students, the first half hour is going to be really boring, but just bear with me. And then we get to the interesting stuff. I'm like, no, we're not going to bear with you. Make it interesting, you know? So I actually sat down with him. Why is it interesting to you? And he told me, and in explaining it to me, he was very passionate and excited. It's like, why didn't that come through with your students? So I think it all starts with awareness, just realizing, hey, there is a better way to do this. So read more books and watch more TED Talks and videos, see what other people are doing that's effective, and then start to emulate those things, learn how to do those types of things.
Yeah, that's so interesting, Todd. Thank you for sharing that. And an awesome question came in from Denise. She wanted to know, Todd, could you share examples of how visual leadership has helped you communicate in a global setting? For instance, maybe working in China. Obviously, I can imagine that if you are working with people that are not native English speakers, that the visual might be especially helpful in terms of bridging some of that cultural divide. But can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. Well, first of all, I have to say this is not a plant, but Denise is a new friend of mine who I met in Aisha Bursel's virtual tea, where you spoke not that long ago. So, Denise, thank you for that question. I talk about that in my TED Talk on the power of visual thinking, so people can look that up or find it on my website. And I also talk about it in my book. Long story short, speaking specifically about China, when I was around 30 years old, I was a project coordinator for a company. They made me project manager and shipped me off to China to oversee this theme park project. I got there with two of my crew members. We didn't speak Chinese, and we found out that no one on the other side spoke English. No one, including the translator, spoke zero English. So all of a sudden, we had this. I said, how do we get this done? We need tools. We need this and that. So what did I do? I actually have a sample of it here, visual representation. I picked up a pen, and I just started drawing. We need a tape measure. We need a hammer. How many of them we need? And so we started, it basically became a game of charades and Pictionary. It's like 2 words, sounds like screwdriver. It's like, how do I get them to figure out what we're talking about? But you know what? The installation was successful, and we each picked up a little of each other's language. I learned how to say ni hao ma and a few other Chinese phrases. But that's one of the key things is visuals cross cultural and language barriers in many ways. Like they say, a smile means the same thing in every language. So whether you're in China or any other country, learn the language, but also see how you could use visuals, but also be cautious because hand gestures can get you in trouble. Not all hand gestures mean the same thing in every language. I'm not even going to use any to illustrate because I don't want to offend anyone in our global audience, but just be aware of that. Not everything crosses cultural lines. So for example, color coding, right? A color, one of my techniques I use is stop, start, continue, red light, yellow light, green light. In the US, we all know that as a traffic light, and those are our colors, but that same metaphor may not translate into every country and every culture. So just be more culturally sensitive and aware when you're using different examples and metaphors. And a lot of my NYU students are from China, international students. So I have to consciously be aware of, I'm a big baseball fan, but a Yankee example is not going to resonate with my students from China. I once asked a question and no one answered. I said, it sounds like Sounds of Silence in here. I'm like, Simon and Garfunkel? No recognition. They thought that was a management consulting firm. They had no, so it's like
that's not just cross-cultural, Todd. That's like with Gen Z, they probably don't know either.
As well. I know I'm aging myself with that. So yes, but that's the thing. Be aware of the metaphors you use, the examples you use, and the references you use. Basically, know your audience, right? Always with any communication, it really does start with know your audience.
Well, amen to that, Todd. That's so true. And a great question came in from Janice. She wanted to know, how can leaders handle difficult conversations using visual leadership? Certainly, there's a lot of challenging conversations that you might imagine people having. Whether it's who knows, you're not getting that promotion, or oh no, sorry, you actually can't keep working from remote, or whatever it might be. Is there a way that visual leadership might be effective in terms of some of these emotionally complex situations, Todd?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you, Janice. This is like plants. Like Janice is a friend of mine, the author of the Banish Burnout Toolkit. based in California, and Janice is a friend I just met on Zoom a few months ago, and now we're close buddies. To answer that question, it starts, even though we're talking about visuals and thinking, it's about listening, right? To be a better leader, be a better listener. There's that analogy of 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we should spend 2/3 more time listening than speaking. So that's what I would say. It starts with listening. It also starts with what I call flipping the eye. If you notice, on the cover of my book is a rainbow-colored eye, and the rainbow represents diversity and inclusion in all its forms. Like the fact that no one in the world has that color eye represents the fact that no one in the world sees the world exactly as you do, right? We each have a different perception, a bit different perspective. It also represents innovation and creativity, so you need to be innovative and creative in terms of how you approach things. To answer Janice's question, we need to, what I call, flip the eye. We need to look at ourselves, so we need to flip the eye to look at ourselves, our biases, our assumptions, our belief systems, and say, are we listening? Are we getting our ideas across? Are we being empathetic and compassionate? And the other component of flipping the eye is, can we see the world through the lens of other people who are different from us? So I think that's the key. The long answer to Janice's question is flip the eye, try to see things from the perspective of the other person, and then try to find a common ground and know that another person is not going to see things exactly the same way that you do. And people are not mind readers. That's another thing to keep in mind. Is it's so clear in our mind, like, oh, I could picture it in my mind, but how do you frame that idea so that someone else could see it? That's one of the biggest challenges that leaders face. But it can be done if you make the effort to do it and communicate more visually and think more visually.
Yeah, very true. Thank you for that, Todd. So a question also came in, and keep them coming, folks. We love your questions, and also any insights that you have. I'm seeing great comments coming through about particular things that they like. Your Gumby over the shoulder was a particular hit. So thank you for sharing with us, guys, your takeaways here. But a question came in from Cheryl, who wanted to know, how do you employ visual leadership to be influential in personal or non-business situations? I assume it does, but does this, Todd, actually apply to things outside the office, and how can we deploy it more effectively?
Yeah, Cheryl is a big fan of yours, Dorie. In fact, we always communicate afterwards because we both are always watching your live show. So Cheryl, nice to have you with us today. The subtitle of my book is Visual Leadership, Leveraging the Power of Visual Thinking in Leadership and in Life. So I intentionally called it that. And I just want to say something about leadership because that's the focus of my work. Everyone is a leader. So it's not like, oh, you're a leader only if you have a CEO or VP title. In fact, I wrote this down because our mutual friend and one of your guests, Jeffrey Hull, said this. I wrote it down. He's the author of Flex. He said, you are the leader of your life. So I always say the same thing, but I just wanted to give Jeffrey a shout out for him and his book because he's a mutual friend. So if you think about that, sometimes I'll ask in a workshop, how many people here are managers? How many people here are leaders? And people don't know whether to raise their hand. Everyone should be raising their hand because we redefine what that means. You need to manage your life and you need to lead your life, right? So it doesn't matter whether you have people reporting to you. There's a saying that you manage processes, you lead people. So when you're doing scheduling and budgeting and planning, those are all management functions. So even outside of work, you need to do those things in your life. And same thing with leadership. You need to have a vision. You need to communicate. You need to motivate and inspire yourself. You need to develop your skills. Those are all leadership functions, right? So you need to manage and lead both in leadership and in life, regardless of what kind of job you have. So thank you for that question, Cheryl.
Yeah, that's terrific. Thank you very much, Todd. Thank you for folks asking questions. If you want to learn more about Todd, just go to his website. It's toddcherches.com. His book is Visual Leadership. And if you want to make sure you never miss one of these conversations, which we have every Thursday, go to dorieclark.com/LinkedIn. You can follow me there, hit the subscribe button, and you will receive notifications about all of these. So Todd, a question that I was actually very curious about is with the pandemic. I mean, nowadays we are all visual all the time. You know, there's the visual of video. All of a sudden, everybody is obsessed with these things. I mean, I came down to Florida for the holidays and I literally have a suitcase full of like lighting equipment, which I never would have bothered to have before. How has the pandemic changed or impacted things with regard to the need for visual leadership or how it manifests?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. Like, for example, this is an image we're all familiar with that we never saw a year ago, right? So like the dreaded, right? So this is this microscopic thing which has changed all of our lives over the last 10 months. In fact, here's, and similar to that, we need to expand our thinking to see I'm like Mr. Props comic. We need to basically think about the world we're living in. The word video and the word visual have the same Latin root, and it goes back to seeing, right? So it's all about seeing. What are you seeing? What are you noticing? It's about how we present. Your guest last week talked about how we present ourselves on camera, right? And how we present ourselves on Zoom. What's interesting is I'm finding last semester in March, we did 7 sessions of my NYU class in person, and then immediately overnight we had to shift to Zoom because of the pandemic. I quickly had to learn how to master Zoom, how to use breakouts and whiteboard and chat and all that kind of stuff. Because I said, we don't want to lose that experiential element of teaching and training. So that's what we all need to do, is adapt to the world of Zoom. And what's interesting is I found that Zoom kind of levels the playing field. If you're sitting in a classroom, you may be sitting looking at the backs of everyone's heads. There's no back of anyone's heads on Zoom. Everyone's face is right up there. Everyone has the same real estate. And what I find is it kind of levels the playing field. It kind of puts titles aside. I'm 6'4", but we're the same height on Zoom, right? So it's kind of, you wouldn't know that about someone else. So that's what I would say is, how do you create I always talk about CAP, confidence, assertiveness, and presence. And those are things that you really need to work on to be more effective, whether it's in person or on Zoom. And I also, one other 3 V's. I know people like sound bites and actionable tools. So visibility, voice, and value. Those are 3 of my most powerful ones, the 3 V's. Visibility is about, are you seen and how are you seen? Voice is about, are you heard and how are you heard? And value is about, are you making a contribution? So whenever you're on a Zoom call, think about those 3 V's. If your camera's off and your mic's off, you're not seen or heard. So how are you going to contribute? So that's what I would say. Put yourself out there and make a contribution.
Todd, that's great. Thank you for that. And a question came in from one of our viewers. Thank you for joining us here. We have Diamond Michael Scott, who says, hi, Todd. What sorts of new visual leadership themes are you looking to explore in the new year? Give us your 2021 411, Todd. What's on your mind? What is kicking around in your brain right now?
Well, thank you, Michael. He's a friend of mine from Denver. Again, another new friend who I made this year. What's interesting is, I said, as an extreme introvert, I would go to a networking event and not talk to anyone. I would meet, I talked to the 2 people who I already knew, and then I'd leave. I'd always be the last one to get there and the first one to leave. On Zoom, I've probably added 1,000 new LinkedIn connections this year. I've made so many amazing people. So thank you, Michael, for that question. I am not a soothsayer or prognosticator by any means, but I think one of the things is, again, the importance of visuals, visual communication, engaging people. We all have that Zoom fatigue, right? It's like, I once dialed into a Zoom meeting by hitting the wrong link, and I ended up in the wrong meeting, and I didn't realize it for like 7 minutes. I was just in this meeting. So we need to be more aware. We could get so burnt out. So stand up and stretch, play some music in between Zoom meetings, get some exercise and some air. But that's what I say is, like, work on your online persona, and also put on your own thinking hat, put on your own futurist cap, and say, when we go, quote, back to the way things were, what is going to go back to the old way, and what things are changed forever? What things are never going back? And everyone has a different answer to that question. Like, I love working from home. So for me, if I had to divide it up, I would say 80% home and 20% out there in the world. That's my preferred ratio. Someone else may say, I'm going crazy at home. I want to be out there 100% of the time. So whatever works for you, but we need to figure out how are we going to navigate this hybrid world. No one knows what it's going to look like, but now's the time to start thinking about it and developing the skills that you're going to need in the future, whatever that is for your career. So that's what I would say is, like, be proactive. That saying, if you need shade, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The next best time is now. So now is the time to start working on the things that you think you're going to need when things open back up again.
Yeah, that is really true. We definitely can get ahead by preparing now and just wargaming a little bit. So that's very powerful. Todd, a question came in from Annette, and I just want to mention, if you are enjoying this conversation, folks, please hit the like button and hit the share button so your friends can benefit from Todd's wisdom as well. Annette wants to know, Todd, what visual practices or rituals do you recommend with people that fear your term ICD? I can't draw. If you feel like, oh no, this isn't my thing, I'm terrible. What would you suggest for those folks? Visual practices or rituals?
Well, one is Annette's a friend of mine who I met this year in Aisha Burcell's virtual teas, which are every Wednesday night at 5 p.m. Eastern. And this is drawing is a skill that anyone can learn. So, for example, here's a drawing that I did in Aisha's workshop once, my book, and for the key concepts. And it's like, just pick up, order some Sharpies. I get no commission from Sharpies, but just pick up some colored markers. And, there's that saying that if you ask a group of business professionals how many of you could draw, like none of them raise their hand or one or two. You ask a group of kindergartners, they all raise their hand, right? So have we lost our skill or our confidence, right? So pick up a pen and just start sketching, drawing. You get better with practice. Annette does some amazing drawings that she's shared with us in that workshop. So that's the thing. And it doesn't always have to be drawing. It's using PowerPoint. Create a vision board. Rip out pages from magazines or print them out from online. Do a Google search and create a visual collage of what you imagine your life to look like in the future. I have a vision board that I created like 20 years ago. On that vision board was a puppy, and I just got a puppy, which I just introduced Lucy, who I just introduced Dorie to before this call. So that was on my vision, and it just happened thanks to my wife's insistence 2 months ago, and it's changed our lives for the better. So that's what I'd say. It's like it's visual props. It's all in, it could be cooking, it could be sculpting, it could be pick up some Play-Doh or something and just start making stuff. That's what I would say is make stuff and put your ideas, make them real. If they only exist in your head, only you see them. But you want to put them out there into the universe. And Seth Godin always says ship, right? Just ship it out there, put it out there. It doesn't have to be perfect. And you fine tune it once it's out there, but you have to have the courage and the confidence to do that. So just kind of push yourself out of your comfort zone and take some risks and pair up with other people who could support you in that.
I love that, Todd, because I am not someone that thinks of myself as particularly visual or particularly artistic. So the idea of just giving yourself permission to, to mess around, to experiment, and to do it badly, I think can be quite powerful. So thank you for that. So also, when it comes to the visual, and you can see, one of my special things here being in my Airbnb is I decided to, there we go. Yeah, we've got the sort of faux deer head. I decided to go for it this time, just like, why not? Let's go all in on the faux deer head while we have the opportunity. But it raises the question, we're sort of sending branding messages about ourselves with this visual communication. And to that point, Jenny had a question. Jenny, like Annette, is I think you guys are homies as well. Jenny and Annette are both in my Recognized Expert course and community as well. So this is like old home week here in the last day of 2020. I love this. But Jenny wants to know, what are your thoughts on backgrounds? We spend so much time in Zoom calls right now. How do we think about that? Should we be using virtual backgrounds? Are they tacky? What's the verdict here, Todd?
Yeah, I would say don't let anything distract from you or your message, right? So like for me, I'm lucky right now. I have this office behind me. I have my books on the shelves. In fact, your three are right above my head. You can see them all in a row, along with our friends like John Baldoni's Grace and Chester Elton and Adrian Gostick's Leading with Gratitude and Aisha's book and Marshall's book, Marshall Goldsmith's behind me. So decorate your office with books. Create your own. One of the things I do when I'm in my other office is I took a picture and I made a screenshot of it. So I've used that as my backdrop. So use something that if it's a vacation photo, that's fine. If it's your office, that's fine. Whatever works for you, just don't make it cheesy. I think when Zoom first started, I was doing all kinds of things. I put myself in the Bat Cave. I put myself in the Brady Bunch squares, as we all did, right? So I think we're over that. It's kind of like when answering machines first came out. We spent a half hour recording our outgoing messages, and we don't do that anymore. So make it professional, have different backgrounds, one for friends. If you're doing a cocktail hour with friends, use one background. If you're doing a work thing, have another background that's more professional. So that's what I would say is be creative. And Jenny's a colleague at NYU, by the way, so a mutual friend of ours. But that's what I would say about backgrounds. I'm not an expert on it, but I would say make it work for you. Use something that is you, that represents you and your personality. And again, that doesn't distract from what you're doing. So that's my answer to that question. I just have to say, speaking of your books, by the way, you did ruin one of my weekends over the summer, and I did blog about that. So this makes up for it. So the fact that you had me on today on your New Year's show makes up for it. But for those who don't know, my blog post, Dorie Clark Ruined My Weekend from July. Long story short, I've been reading Dorie's blogs and watching her videos for years. I finally got one of her books, Entrepreneurial You. I picked it up in bed on a Saturday morning, started thumbing through it. And before I realized that I had missed breakfast, I had missed lunch. My wife's like, are you ever coming down? And I ended up spending the entire weekend not only reading the book, but doing my Entrepreneurial You self-assessment that I downloaded. So I spent the entire weekend with Dorie. Unfortunately, my wife was like not jealous about that, but it was just a great, so I ended up getting both your other books too. And I know you have a new one coming out next year, so I look forward to that. But I just want to say, be a reader, watch TED Talks, watch people's videos. That's the best way. Be a sponge. there's a book by Austin Kleon called Steal Like an Artist. I just reread it. So don't steal people's stuff, but let other people inspire you in your thinking, right? So we aggregate, we pick up bits and pieces like what's the best of Dorie Clark, what's the best of Marshall Goldsmith or Aisha Purcell, and kind of like just make them all part of you. You know, I think that's my thing. I have all these books behind me that I've read, and that's what I would say to everyone. Watch and listen and read as many things as possible, but then put your stuff out there into the world based on how you're influenced by all these other amazing and generous thinkers who are sharing their stuff with the world.
That's amazing, Todd. Thank you. We're ending 2020 on a great note, which is you praising me. Thank you. But also ending 2020 on a great note with your amazing insights about visual leadership and how to incorporate this new skill and new modality into the ways that you lead people. Thank you all for joining. If you're interested in actually getting the amazing Entrepreneurial You self-assessment that Todd mentioned for free, you can actually get it at dorieclark.com/entrepreneur. And if you would like to learn more about Todd and his work, including his book, Visual Leadership, go to toddcherches.com. We are here every single Thursday, noon Eastern, 9 Pacific, 5 o'clock Greenwich Mean Time. And we will actually be back in the new year, 1 week from today. And our special guest is David Burkus, who is a fellow Harvard Business Review author. He has a new book about the world of remote work that he is going to be talking about. So we're excited to have him. Todd, thank you so much for joining us.
Sorry, this was great. Thank you. And Happy New Year to you and everyone else out there.
Happy New Year to everyone. Take care, guys.
Thanks, Dorie.